What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Early Wedge. This, of course, is the DFS show because it's Monday at 7 o'clock, which usually means it's me, Sia Nejad, Mike McClure, and Rick Gaiman hosting. But Rick was at Augusta and he's traveling back. So it's me and you, Mike. How you doing today?
I'm doing well, Sia. Just fired up on Monday. It definitely feels like a Monday after everything we went through at the Masters there. It's like I like that we have signature events back to back. I know some people don't. The thing that I'm wondering, though, which I'm sure we'll talk about during the show, is if I'm feeling a little tired and hungover from the Masters, are the guys who actually battled for 4 rounds and then traveling and then doing it all again, are they feeling the same way? I think that's always the question when you're talking about signature event the week after a major. Obviously, we're going to talk about it on this show, but I'm feeling it, so I have to think some of these golfers might be as well.
Joseph Boza in the chat says classic Masters hangover. Yeah, and some people might feel it more than others depending on the circumstances they were in down the stretch. Mike, before we get to RBC Heritage or the RBC Heritage in Harbour Town Golf Links, talk to me about, we did the recap show. It was me, Jason Sobel, Josh, our esteemed producer, was in there as well. And then, of course, Rick Gaiman joined us. But you had a big Bryson ticket. And, listen, I get the whole, like, we're celebrating Rory thing, and I get it. But, like, I'm just asking you, because I didn't have the Bryson ticket, that how it sort of unfolded, especially on the front 9 there for Bryson. How did that get you?
Yeah, it didn't feel good. Fortunately, I still had a great week and was still very profitable from some of the other bets, and in DFS, Bryson still put up a fine score. So it really wasn't bad. It certainly stung because it removed all the, big upside that I had throughout the week. But yeah, I think if you're Bryson, it's just so unfortunate because, had he known that Rory would have had some of those troubles as well, he certainly would have made different decisions on some of those shots. So it's crazy. It's a crazy game that we play. That they play as well. I'm happy for Rory, and I wasn't necessarily rooting for Rory to get it done from the start, but watching the way things unfolded, it would have just been so absolutely devastating to go lose that playoff that at that point I had no choice but to root for it and be just extremely happy for Rory.
It's so funny you say that because Rory put himself in a position that was going to be just so deflating and so defeating if he didn't win, that it put all the viewers in a position to be rooting for Rory, whether they were rooting for Rory originally or not, because I'm sure there are Rory detractors out there. There are people who had a ticket on Bryson or Justin Rose or Ludwig or whatever. But even if you had that, Mike, to your point, you hate to see anybody lose the way he was potentially going to lose, just constantly putting himself basically way ahead and then way behind, or at least, even with 1 or 2 other players. So I think you just captured that really well, because I didn't really have a dog in the fight. For golf, I wanted Rory to win, but I really wanted him to win down the stretch. And I thought Rose was really good down the stretch too, but I was definitely rooting for Rory McIlroy. Joey B says, Sia with the red golf shirt. He's channeling a Tiger Woods 2026 Masters return at SportsLine. That would be fun, man. If we could somehow get Tiger competitive on the course again, that would be so fantastic. All right, let's talk about RBC Heritage. Let's talk about Harbour Town. Pete Dye course, Mike. We're talking about par 71, 7,200 yards. It looks like we got about 71 players in the field at this moment. I don't think Decky and Rory are here. Outside of that, for this signature event, I think we have pretty much everybody else. And Josh, you can feel free to correct me if I'm wrong on that. But again, if it's a signature event, that means most of the time, including this week, it's no cut. Mike, I do want to ask you, are you looking for a particular golfer here? I think this is the type of, I know Rick calls this course positional. I do think, if you're wayward off the tee, it's not really that big of a deal. I don't think there's like a huge penalty there, but I do think approach play and short game with these small POA greens and putting certainly in play here. Is there a certain type of golfer you're looking for?
Yeah. And, if you've watched the show for the, since we've been doing it this season, you're probably sick of hearing strokes gained approach, right? You're probably sick of hearing that. It actually matters more here. It's incredibly important. It's the one area that I want to focus on, because it really comes down to that. And I think that what's interesting, I'm willing to back guys here that have been a little erratic off the tee, because you don't have to hit the driver here. And that could be a good thing for a couple of people in the field. It could be a bad thing for a couple of people in the field. But the fact that it is not really a driver golf course, that is fascinating to me. Again, we're speaking here on this show more from a DFS perspective than a sports betting perspective. And from that angle, I think that you have to be able to consider guys that can just absolutely be dialed in on approach, because they have a guaranteed 4 rounds to go rack up birdies in this particular format. I'm going to lean even more on strokes gained approach than I will all season. And then one more thing that I will say about a Pete Dye course. When you hear Pete Dye course, to me, the first thing that should go up is course history, right? Because you should understand that the courses are different, and they do profile similar in certain ways. And we have a big sample size of players that really perform well on Pete Dye courses.
Yeah, fair enough. I do want to talk to you about, because we're talking about a DFS show ultimately, Mike. Talk to me about, at a signature event or at a no-cut event, what your strategy is before we bring up the pricing and all of that, because I do think, and by the way, I do want to mention, for those that are, looking at guys who might be like really inaccurate off the tee, Mike, you did mention something that was, I thought, really important. Like, you're not pulling out driver here very much. And so guys who might be wavered, like a Sahith Theegala, who's done well here, Wyndham Clark, who's done well here. Like, if you're looking for accuracy in any regard, like, I feel like that could kind of steer you perhaps in the wrong direction, because guys are going to be generally hitting it to similar places off the tee. Mike, do you agree with that?
I definitely agree with it. There's several guys that I think Theegala definitely is one you mentioned. I mean, even Justin Thomas, frankly, he's been awful with the driver. If you remove the driver from JT, I mean, he's on the first page of the leaderboard every week. Like, he definitely is going to be. So yeah, it's definitely not a driver course. Going to lean extremely hard into that approach play.
Justin Thomas's metrics at Harbour Town over the last 4 years have been really, really good. And that includes 2 top 10 finishing positions. Okay, game theory wise, or at least roster construction wise, let's talk roster construction as opposed to game theory. It's a no-cut event, Mike. So before we look at the pricing, this does lend itself to a lot of people doing the stars and scrubs thing, correct?
A lot of stars and scrubs. It's an extremely valid path, especially, it's a limited field, but there are not bad golfers in the 6K range here, right? So you can definitely go build competitive lineups. And I am far more likely to play the 6K golfer here when I know I'm getting 4 rounds, right? When I'm talking about a 6K golfer at the Valspar, that is not the same thing as a 6K golfer in this field, because the fact that you're just simply guaranteed 4 rounds, the fewer number of entrants in general, the tighter the scores will tend to be. I just think that you almost have to build stars and scrubs here.
Okay. Does that mean, and I don't know if you've built lineups yet, it's only Monday. Does that mean like the middle ranges are to the extent you're building lineups, the middle ranges are going to be ignored, or does stars and scrubs mean something like different in terms of what your builds look like?
I think the middle ranges can definitely be ignored. I'm fascinated to see where Scotty comes down, because he's expensive. Finally, he's cracked the 13K.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the mid ranges probably get ignored. I'm trying to look at actual pricing here. I think let's say 8,800 down to 8K is not going to get used much at all here.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's going to be flushed out, because I mean, I can start lineups with 3 golfers here that are in the 10s. I can play Patrick Cantlay, Justin Thomas, Colin Morikawa to start the lineup, and I've still got an average of 6,300. And there's multiple guys that like even a guy, I know it's not a greatest course fit, but in a limited field, like you still can throw guys like Gary Woodland in there, Val Maki in there, and round out those lineups. It's just, yeah, that's the way my lineups are almost definitely going to be building here at RBC.
Yeah, I built a lineup before the show, just kind of for fun and just to see how I could build. It did not include Scotty Scheffler. It included two 10K guys, though, which we'll get to that range in a second. It included a guy in the upper 7K range and then three 6K guys that I like quite a bit. And again, in a no-cut event, those guys worth perhaps a little bit more than they would be during a regular cut tournament. All right, well, we got to get to this 10K, 9K, 8K, 7K, and 6K range. We're going to do it right after this message from our partners.
One of golf's elite courses, Quail Hollow, hosts the game's top players at the PGA Championship this May on CBS.
We're back on the Early Wedge. My name is Sia Nejad. I'm joined by Mike McClure, and we usually have Rick here, but fortunately, while he's not here, we have rickrungood.com to go over the pricing tiers and some of the information that you're going to want to look at. So, Josh, if you could pull up Rick Run Good, we'll start with the 10K tier, Mike McClure. And listen, signature event. So, as you might expect, this has got a lot of big names. You mentioned it. Scotty Scheffler above 13K, 13,100. It is pretty difficult to build Scotty Scheffler lineups, but certainly very doable. Ludwig, 11,000. That's a $2,100 decrease there. Then we got Colin Morikawa, Xander Schauffele, Justin Thomas, Patrick Cantlay. Mike, when I built the lineup that I really liked, it was, I'm trying to remember now. It was definitely, Justin Thomas was definitely in that lineup. He's probably outside of Scotty. Actually, Scotty was in the lineup with Justin Thomas. Now that I think about it, it was a Scotty JT lineup. Those are my two favorite in this range. What are your two favorite?
Yeah, I think it's super interesting here because there's a number of paths. There's just one clear game theory play coming up we'll talk about, but I mean, it's hard to say in a vacuum. Scotty's definitely my favorite. Scotty's still elite and he deserves the price tag that he has. I'm not getting to him a ton right now. I think that I will still play some Scotty and just manually kind of force it in. But guy number one that is coming in here, for me is Cantlay because I do value the course history. And the course history is just simply undeniable here on Patrick Cantlay. And I have to want, I know he made the cut at the Masters, not saying that that's an easy feat, not saying it's a difficult feat for a golfer as skilled as him, but he's quietly just kind of lurking there and just kind of hanging out there, not having great flashy performances, but really, nothing horrible, right? Now you get the course history. Now you get a guy that I think it's just, he's there. Like, I think he's there in this field. I think there's a Masters hangover for some of the others, but the Masters hangover is unlikely to hit a guy like Cantlay to me when you're going somewhere that you just absolutely crush it, right? That I think that's something he's someone who's looking forward to this event. I'm going to play Cantlay first. The Morikawa question is super interesting to me. If there's someone that's burnt out a little bit, I wouldn't be surprised if Colin Morikawa is the guy that's, mentally drained coming in here. He projects really well. So for me, it's going to be the decision that I have to make later in the week because he projects well. He's obviously great with the approach play. And then the other guy that I think is interesting for sure is Xander Schauffele. Like Xander's, a year ago, he's one of the best players in the world. He's still one of the best players in the world. Had a shaky start and shook it off really nicely at the Masters, really played well. If he had played a little better in round one on the front nine, Xander might have been right there.
Yeah.
In the Masters. Like it was all front nine on round one that did him in really. And just to recover from that, I think is so impressive. I'm probably going to manually force in Xander over Colin now.
It's interesting. Xander had he's had short game issues over his last 6 tournaments, which actually predates the rib injury to some degree or to a small degree. But I think we see it here. Yeah, we see it here. I mean, I do think the short game issues might creep in for Xander. I will mention Colin's had some short game issues as well lately, and he's also had short game issues at Harbour Town. I mean, again, when we're talking about Harbour Town, we're talking about relatively small sample size, although he has played here a handful of times. But I do worry, Mike. I don't know if you're kind of stressing. I know we talked about approach, but when it comes to around the green play and the putter, like, I'm seeing some sort of cracks in the armor here for both of those guys. Is it enough? Should I be kind of not ignoring it, but like, how much are you factoring that in?
I think I'll factor it in a little bit. I think that, I'm talking in the chat as well. So obviously if you guys are watching, definitely keep questions coming in the chat there. It's such a fascinating thing to talk about, because how do you quantify if someone's burnt out or not burnt out? I think that answer really, a three-hole stretch on Thursday or Friday can determine whether or not they're officially locked in or burned out. It's just, it's so high variance when you have this situation for some of these guys. For Colin Morikawa, some of those struggles, I'm going to attribute that to playing so well, frankly, and being right there and having all the attention and just the brutal schedule. And I think that it does come crashing down a little bit in this sense. So again, he projects very well. It's hard to quantify those things. I'm going to make the manual adjustments and drop Colin in the DFS streets, at least. Wouldn't be a problem with them backing him still if you like him in a top 20 kind of market. I'm still always going to be fine with something like that. But with Xander, I'm more likely to just continue to buy on Xander. I think that he's just been working his way back, and I was very, very impressed with what I saw from Xander at the Masters.
Yeah, especially down the stretch. Another guy that was good down the stretch was Ludwig. So that's the only guy in this 10K range and above we have not talked about. T10 here last year at Harbour Town. Your thoughts on him from a DFS standpoint?
I think that from a DFS standpoint, he's a fantastic play. I think it's hard to get to him. And why I think it's hard to get to him is Justin Thomas is 10-2, Patrick Cantlay is 10. And while you can build lineups with them, I think that people all the way at that 11 number, it's just going to be reach for Scotty, or just jam Cantlay because of the course history. And JT, I think that in years past, this would be a spot where people might jump off of JT a little bit, but I think collectively, I think everything's sharp enough nowadays that everyone kind of understands that you're not going to hit driver on every hole here. And that means Justin Thomas is probably an elite play. Yeah, I think Ludwig is a great play. I need to see some ownership data on it, and that'll come, when we basically I'll jump in the chat on YouTube or come join you guys for the live chat potentially. We'll talk about it more there, but my official answer and stance on Ludwig's truly going to come down to his projected ownership.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I think JT and Ludwig, just from a DFS standpoint, might be my favorite plays. I mean, JT might get some ownership, but I just like JT in this tournament, Mike. I'm considering him as an outright, and I'm not a JT guy. I think I've taken him once this year, mind you, but I'm not a JT guy. The metrics were kind of just screaming at me, though. These are the Justin Thomas. Thank you, Josh. These are the metrics from the RBC Heritage if you're watching us on YouTube. I mean, this guy is just a king out here. And again, to our point about the off the tee stuff and maybe, withholding driver, his off the tee stuff is off the charts, really, with the exception of in 2016, he didn't have a good off the tee play, but the ball striking is brilliant. Short game, very good here. Really like Justin Thomas in this tournament. All right, let's move on to the 9K range. Believe it or not, Mike, this is a range I don't like very much. And I think we're all usually a champion of the 9K range. Yeah. And I think a lot of these guys are steady, but in the builds that we're talking about, Mike, with stars and scrubs, I think those stars tend to be in the 10K, at least for this tournament, tend to be in the 10K and above range. And that had me in the one lineup I did before the show. It had me skipping this range altogether, and I wasn't really feeling that bad about it. So maybe I should be. Who do you like in this range?
Yeah, the more we talk about it, the more I'm not anxious to get into this range. It's really, I said earlier, I mentioned 8,800 down. I actually think it's kind of this entire range, under 10K to 8K is a range that I'm not living in. And, I think the most interesting thing here and the most interesting decision is clearly Corey Connors.
Yeah.
And the reason for it is, my goodness, he's played so well. There's an absolute scenario there where Corey Connors won that Masters tournament. He was right there. And the problem is he's played so much golf. He's had so much success. He's a burnout candidate for me, big time. Coming here, just man, he has been on a roll, and you could argue that he's on a roll and can handle it, and it's going to be just fine. It's finally coming with the elevated price tag. It's probably going to come with some of that ownership. I'm going to take the stance and I'm just going to ignore what the computer wants me to do. And I'm not going to play Corey Connors this week at all. I'm just going to full fade and see what happens.
Yeah, I'm a full fade on Corey Connors as well. That doesn't mean I hate the play. I'm really, a lot of what we're building into that take is how we're constructing our lineups, but also the burnout factor. And that's, again, not something you can quantify. It's sort of a leap of faith when it comes to that stuff. There are other 9K range guys, though, that kind of fit that Corey Connors mold, like Russell Henley, for example, Tommy Fleetwood. Now, I'm not a big fan of either of those two guys either. Jordan Spieth down the way has really good history here, but he also has really bad history here. So I just want to mention that when he shines, he shines. And when he doesn't shine, the metrics are pretty bad. Is there anybody else in this 9K range? And I'm not saying Jordan Spieth's a bad play. I just wanted to point out it's not consistently good for Jordan Spieth. Anybody else, Mike, that you like in the 9K range?
I'm glad you mentioned Jordan Spieth. This is interesting. He's had decent course history here. He looked fine at the Masters in terms of competing. I think that he obviously clearly gets up for Augusta National. There's no doubt about that. I honestly think that I would maybe sprinkle a little Spieth depending on the ownership. I don't know necessarily what that ownership's going to look like, but once I have that data, I'd make a decision there. But I will talk about the other one in a bit with Max Homa. But I think that you also need to talk of just a little bit of course history guys, a little bit of guys we weren't sure of, but really flashed some form at a very difficult test at Augusta. Very curious how they perform here at this signature event. So, I wish I had a better answer for you, but I'm not loving the 9K range here. Really at all.
If you had to guess, though, I do think people might subscribe to the Corey Connors burnout thing with Jordan Spieth's track record. And again, I said a lot of it's good and a lot of it's bad, but the good is really good. And he's been either first or second in 2 of the last 3 years for him. 2023, he was second. 2022, he won this thing. At 9,200, don't you feel like people are going to be like, all right, this is the time I'm going to go in on Spieth? If he was 9,700, which he never would be right now, but I feel like he's going to be, it'll be somewhat flat across the 9K range, but I think he's going to be the most popular guy in this range, Mike.
I could definitely see it. This is very early ownership numbers. And again, I'll pop in the live chat at least and awesome. Really kind of address that a little further, but I'm still showing him single digits, 10%, 9%. I could see it definitely getting higher. I think it will depend on if people buy into the Corey Connors being burnout narrative. I think the more we talk about it, the more it will certainly get bought into. I think that Spieth, his talent in this field and the price point, it feels appropriate when you've got guys like Corey Connors at 9.8. So I don't have a hard stance one way or the other on Spieth.
All right. David Talk says top Canadian Connors is plus 125. Should we take Pendrith at plus 330? So keep in mind, David, 2 different conversations in terms of DFS and betting. Mike, you're not on that betting show with us, but me or Eric Cohen have been taking Connors top Canadian for each of the last, 5 weeks or so, and it's hit every time. That was the first market I looked at because I was curious what the number was going to be. Pendrith is in it, Nick Taylor, a couple other guys that absolutely can compete. But I don't know. Maybe this is the week, Mike, I don't take this bet. Any thoughts on, listen, I know we had the DFS conversation, but when you're talking top Canadian, now you're narrowing it just to a handful of people. So would you be more inclined to take that market versus the DFS market?
I think so, yeah. I think that I want to see a top 20 number. I haven't run any of that stuff yet, but yeah, I want to look at, I do think his top 20 numbers have probably gotten a lot more expensive over this run. So yeah, I would be, if I wanted to back Connors, it would be that top Canadian market because we don't have a lot of great course history from Pendrith or Nick Taylor here. Both, I believe Pendrith has played once, missed the cut.
I believe so. I'll double check that.
And then I believe Taylor, I know, has missed the cut a couple times and then made the cut recently, but nothing special in terms of a finish. So
yeah, Pendrith missed the cut in 2023.
Connors, it would be top Canadian market again, actually.
Pendrith missed the cut in 2023. Nick Taylor's played here at least 4 times in the last 5 years. 2 missed cuts, T41, T49. So just not played well here at all. All right, let's go. And I do want to mention Victor Hovland's at 9K. Mike, are you? It's kind of cheap for a guy with that type of upside. Not much of a track record here. Any thoughts on him before we get to the 8K range?
Honestly, I'm going to be out on Victor. I actually, it's crazy. It sounds crazy because we're not talking like everyone's a burnout candidate. I think that Victor is potentially in that spot as well here. We're talking about his 2 most recent times we've seen him. He won the Valspar when he was coming in just absolutely horrendous form. 3 consecutive miscuts heading in, wins the Valspar, then heads off to the Masters and plays okay, really, at the Masters. But I don't love the spot for Victor.
Yeah, I don't think I want to play him either. Let's go to the 8K range. I think the guy at the top of the 8K range, Mike, is going to be very popular, and as well he should be. Missed cut last week. It was mostly due to short game, actually almost entirely due to short game issues. So I suppose he could have those issues here as well. I'm actually talking about Sepp Straka, if I didn't already mention his name. Looking at his history here, it's very good. T5, miscut, T3, 2 of his last 3 years. Coming in great form. I think a lot of people will gobble him up at 8,800. Sung J.M., if we go down the board, Robert McIntyre, Wyndham Clark, Daniel Berger, and then we rounded out with Minwoo Lee, Mav McNeely, and Justin Rose. Who do you like in the 8K range, Mike?
Yeah, the 8K range, I don't love this range. I would be willing to speculate on Sepp Straka. Just I hope that the miscut at the Masters does kind of drop the ownership just a touch. I think it might, just because also just the way the builds are going, right? So we talked about the stars and scrubs, the desire to go get 2 guys in the 10K range. I think it's pretty easy to do. So I'm not living in that range. Almost certainly. I'm looking at all the lineups ahead at build.
As you're doing that, I'll mention. So I built a lineup and then I changed it. So effectively, I built 2 lineups before the show. One of them had Sepp Straka with 2 10K guys, Justin Thomas and another. It might have been Ludwig. The other one, because I wanted to try to sneak Scotty in, was Scotty and Justin Thomas. And then I had to drop down to Aaron Rye, who we'll get to in the 7K range. But my point is, if you're building Scotty lineups, it's very likely that you're not getting to Sepp Straka, because you don't want you don't want him to be your second man in, or at least most people won't want him to be the second man in. So just keep that in mind when you're building lineups, especially in a shorter field where ownership is going to be, enlarged across the board. Think about when you're building with a chalky guy, who that next or third man is for some of these lineups, and maybe pivot off of that. Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, I would say the guy that the computer likes a little bit still, which I don't know how sold I am on it, is Robert McIntyre at 8,500. And I think it's just general, overall skill set and talent is what I think is going on there. I mean, he's been great tee to green overall. The approach play specifically hasn't been like elite. The putting has kind of been a problem. So I'm fighting it a little bit, but the computer likes McIntyre, and that's really all I'm getting to in the 8K range. Like I got a tiny bit of interest in Daniel Berger, it looks like, but I think he's another candidate for potential burnout. And just the price point's finally catching up. So yeah, I don't love this 8K range, guys. I wish I did. I wish I had more to offer there, but when I run this many lineups and it spits out and it's just like, there's one guy. Yeah. And I'm telling it to run a lot of lineups here. Yeah, McIntyre's it.
I will say this about Robert McIntyre. If you played him in any regard last week, DFS or betting, he let you down so hardcore that I think in this particular circumstance, especially seeing as though I don't think people are going to think Robert McIntyre is a particularly good course fit here. He doesn't have good history here, or doesn't have much history, but the history he does have isn't very good. I think he's a really good candidate to have much lower ownership, especially with Sepp Straka, Sung J.M., Daniel Berger, Justin Rose in this range, Mav McNeely even, maybe Minwoo. Mike, I feel like he would be the game theory guy in this range.
I definitely think so, because now that I'm looking at it, I totally glanced over. He was right above him. Sung J. I do like Sung J, actually. It's telling me to play Sung J. In fact, if I had lineups where I liked Corey Connors that the computer said, I'm going to elect to play Sungjae in Corey Connors' spot and use that additional salary elsewhere. Sungjae is also kind of a course history darling a little bit. And I say a little bit, it's T13, T21, T7, and T12. The thing that we talked about a little bit on some of the shows last week with Sungjae is just, he's kind of streaky. He's been kind of streaky of late. And man, he was absolutely dialed at the Masters. I know he gave it back in a big way towards the end of, I believe that was round 2 or 3. I like Sungjae here. I'm going to play a bit of Sungjae at 87. Yeah, I'm going to play some Sungjae.
Sungjae is such an enigma to me. He still just can't seem to get it together over 4 rounds or 2, depending on whether he misses the cut on approach. But yeah, when he's locked in, he's locked in. And I don't think a ton of people are going to play him. Minwoo Lee, Josh was asking about him. Any thoughts on Minwoo? I don't like how he profiles here. Yeah. History certainly doesn't really tell us any story. He missed the cut in 2023. It's the approach play that I think is the main issue for Minwoo.
Yes. This is not my favorite spot for Minwoo. And a lot of it really just comes down to what you said. It's the exact inverse profile of what I would want, right? I tell you where I want to play Minwoo Lee and where I think he has a chance to win is the PGA Championship coming up, the next major. That's where I want to play Minwoo. That's where the driving distance really, really matters. And he is just awesome off the tee. So I'm not playing Minwoo here. I'm saving him. I'm waiting. I kind of hope that he somehow doesn't play well here at all, which I think is very possible. The one more thing, though, we started the show off about why I'm going to just be in on some of the approach play. I liked what I saw from Sungjae on approach a bit in the middle of the Masters. And you kind of hit on it there. It's just like how he can get streaky. That's what I want. I want that high variance when I know that there are 4 rounds, because Sungjae can go out there and shoot 62 at any given moment, right? When he's playing like that. And the fact that you get 4 rounds guaranteed, that's the kind of time I want to buy Sungjae in.
All right. There's a lot of really interesting names in the 7K range, interesting names in the 6K range. I know we had, I think it was Taylor asking about Max Homa and whether the Masters was a flash in the pan or whether he's potentially back. We're going to get to the 7K range. We're going to get to the 6K range right after this message from our partners.
Baby, we are gonna start a fire.
From world-renowned clubs
Simply devastating
to worldwide stars.
Wrexham have done it. This incredible ride continues.
The English Football League on CBS Sports Network, and stream every match live on Paramount Plus.
We're back on the early wedge, and Mike, we got to look at the 7K range because there's going to be some popular names in this 7K and 6K range. Not in a extreme way where we have to fade them, but just like some of them will be. But some of these names are great. We start at the top with Aaron Rai, who, by the way, I love. I love Aaron Rai in DFS this week. We got Denny McCarthy, JJ Spawn, a bit of a bounce back, perhaps. I mean, he made the cut, but wasn't very good. Finished near last place. We got big names like Akshay, Keegan. We get to Bud Cauley, who I don't know if he's going to be a popular name or not. I just know he should be. Michael Kim still not getting the credit he deserves. Let's kind of stop there. We get to Sahith at 7,300, but what do we like at the top here?
Yeah, it's Aaron Rai by a considerable margin. For me, when I tell it to build, he's player number 1 really in exposure overall. And a lot of it just comes, I like the profile really. And I think that, we've seen something kind of interesting with him. And I want to say it's kind of similar. I know we got the miscut in there. You see the miscut at the Houston Open. I'm willing to forgive that when you look at everything else you've seen, right? I'm going to forgive it. I think it's okay to throw it out. He's kind of like Corey Connors. And the only difference is now Corey Connors is 9,800 instead of in the 7s. And Aaron Rai is still 7,900. And Aaron Rai, based off his play and profile, I would argue he could be 8,900 instead of 7,900. Yeah,
I'm a big fan of Rai. And I will say, he played here 2 years ago. I think that was the only time. And it was in 2023. It was T48. He had major short game issues. The ball striking was there. And as far as the recent form of the short game, it's a little up and down, but it's certainly better than it was in 2023 when he played here at Harbour Town. So I think Rai also profiles really well. How about a couple of other names in the 7K range? I did mention guys like Bud Cauley, for example. I mean, you look at the metrics and it's just kind of like screaming off the page, but maybe it's the kind of thing where can Bud Cauley keep this up, Mike? Is there other names, including maybe Bud, that are on your list?
Yeah, Bud Cauley, I mean, he's kind of got to be there. If you look at this field, total strokes gained over the last 24 rounds, he's in the top 10. He's sixth. He's certainly not priced like it. And that goes to your question, can he keep it up? But it also goes back to what we've talked about the entire show and what we led with. You tell me I get 4 rounds of Bud Cauley? Yeah, sign me up. I'll take Bud Cauley when I know I'm getting 4 rounds and I know it's not, a 42% chance that I'm only getting 2 rounds, right? I'm getting 4 rounds from an elite approach player. And if we're again talking tee to green and total strokes gained, the guy that's ranked 6th in this field over the last 24 rounds.
All right, I'll throw a couple of other names at you, and then we'll get to the low 7K range and see if you like a name there. But let's talk about Brian Harmon, who has a very solid history here. Keegan Bradley let a lot of people down last week. Akshay Bhatia made the cut and then kind of faded. JJ Spawn, any of those names intriguing to you?
I mean, yeah, let's see where I'm getting some of them. They all are kind of intriguing just because we're talking about them being less than $8,000, right? And they're talented golfers. You get the 4 rounds. I'm getting a little bit of them, but because I'm playing so much of the last 2 guys that we mentioned, Aaron Ryan, Bud Cauley, that they're kind of getting pushed out, but they're right there, and they're all, I think, great plays, and it kind of goes to what we talked about, not having a ton of interest in that 8K range.
Fair enough. Let's go to the bottom of the 7K range to see if your lineups are pushing out any of like Ben On, Davis Thompson, Sahith Theegala. Obviously some good history last year here. Taylor Pendrith, we kind of addressed him in that top Canadian market that we discussed. Harris English, Matt Fitzpatrick. Then we go to Hoagie, Finau, which is interesting to see Finau down at 7,100. And then Sam Burns and Will Zalatoris round out the 7K range. Anybody popping up in that range?
Will Zalatoris. I mean, we kind of mentioned, I know the form, you can call into question the form. He obviously just missed the cut in a pretty spectacular way.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, it wasn't pretty at that spot. No real course history, but at some point when you get 4 rounds, like if we're talking about the golfers, just pure raw talent, Will Zalatoris is not a $7,000 golfer in a limited field, no cut event. To me, he's not. He's just not.
Totally agree. He's T44 here last year, T42 in 2021, but he does feel like he profiles a lot better than those finishing positions. And if people are going to be off him, Mike, because of his history and because of what's happened last week and some of the other times this year that he's let people down, seems like a pretty good candidate at 7,000. See, like to me, Mike, as you know, miscut aside, of course, history aside, if he was 7,800, would we blink?
No, not at all.
And it's 1,000. I don't think he's going to get a ton of ownership. So it's not like they're like, oh, what a big discount. I don't think people are thinking of Will Zalatoris that way.
I mean, yeah, not at all. And just like, I'm not going to give a full lineup, but I'll read it off to you. And you guys, there are guys in the 6s we're about to talk about. But you can start a lineup with Patrick Cantlay, Xander Schauffele, Justin Thomas, 3 elite players. And Will Zalatoris can be your 4th guy in. Wow. And guess what? You can still actually go submit a lineup. Somehow, some way, you can play Cantlay, Thomas, Xander, and Will Zalatoris, and you can still legally submit the lineup. And that just doesn't feel right, does it? Like, to me, it doesn't when it's a limited field event. Again, this is not 150 players at the US Open. Like, this is I'm in on Zalatoris at 7K, and yeah, so be it if he beats me.
Before we get to the 6K range, I do want to mention Sahith Theegala just because of his history here. First time out in 2022, T70, but T5 in 2023 and 2nd overall in 2024. He's only, 7,300. Is he the type of guy that you're just going to ignore because you like other guys more, or does he fit into some of these lineups?
For me, I'm going to ignore because I like other guys more. Now, would it shock me if he goes and plays well? Absolutely not. I I just don't think his game and form and all of that is really where it was at that time.
Yeah.
And that's my concern. So this is a situation where I think the price is, I mean, again, if he was 7,800, 8K, I wouldn't care. Like I wouldn't bat it. Like that's probably where he should be, but I'm going to be off of him here despite totally getting the interest.
Yeah. And I will say this, well, I mean, great form at Harbour Town, but like he was doing it in a way, we pulled up Josh pulled up the stats there, what he was doing at RBC. He's doing it in a way that wasn't like exactly sustainable when it comes to the ball striking. It wasn't, it's not great. And it was like a lot of short game, a lot of around the green play, which is obviously helpful. But I don't know that when you contrast that or compare that to his recent form, it doesn't really inspire a ton of faith in playing a guy who finished second in T5. All right, let's get to that 6K range. There's a lot of guys I like in this range. I'm going to rattle off a few names, Mike, that I wrote down. Like these are names I've even already taken I did the without market thing for some of these 6K guys, but it wasn't the without Scotty market. It was without, I guess, the big four, which was Scotty, Ludwig, Colin, and I'm missing somebody. Scotty, Ludwig, Colin, and Xander. It would have been the top four there. And a few guys that I bet in that market at like 60, 80, 100, 120 to 1. Ryan Gerard, I love. Sammy Valimaki. I bet those in that without market. Other guys I like. I'm considering Eric Cole. I'm not in love with it. I like Brian Campbell because he's a flat 6K. Jacob Bridgman's been my guy all year. I don't think he profiles perfectly for this course, but I still like him and he can get super hot with the putter. And then I think Lucas Glover is worth maybe taking a look at. Those are the names that I saw. What about the names that you saw?
Yeah, Valimaki stands out immediately to me at 6,200. Some of that is, again, pricing and the way just the model, like the way lineups can be built. 6,200, there's so many lineups that which probably drives up his ownership, but there are so many lineups you can build that you just need the 6,200 or less guy.
Yeah.
He's the guy for sure. For me, first guy in that range, Valimaki, without a doubt. Next for me is probably going to be Jacob Bridgman on some talent alone. I think that he's the guy I want to look to. We haven't mentioned the stat necessarily just yet, but proximity bucket that I'm looking at 150 to 175. That is where Bridgman has been absolutely dialed. One of the best players in this field in that actual proximity. So I'm going to be, if I need someone under 7K, Bridgman is there. But I also, real quick, I go on these tangents and I apologize for you guys, but it sticks out in my mind. Like Jacob Bridgman is great. Will Zalatoris is $300 more in a no-cut event. Like Will Zalatoris is just flat out mispriced at 7K. I'm sorry. He is. I'm playing a ton of Will Zalatoris this week. Other guys, I like the call out on Lucas Glover. Could totally get there. I like Gerard. He's popping really well. And then Highsmith. I mean, I know he won the event, and we like that because the fact that he has obviously shown it, whether it was a flash in the pan or not. 6,200. Yeah, when you need $6,200 players, it's Highsmith and Valimaki for me.
Yeah, I like Highsmith is sort of like the next tier down for me in this 6K range. By the way, Sites 501 says Valimaki first round leader. I have that circled like literally on this piece of paper I'm looking at over to my right. Of course, I want to wait for tee times to come out. And so on the betting show, we have tee times and a better read on the weather. Valimaki certainly might be one of my first round leaders. So love that call. That guy can absolutely. And again, Mike, we're talking about a no-cut event. We've seen Sammy Valimaki absolutely explode round to round. Like he can have a really bad round and a medium round and two great rounds. And that is an excellent 6,200 play in a no-cut event.
100%. It's the true. I mean, he's a much better play now than he has been all season, frankly. And it's just comes down to format, right?
Yeah, exactly. Joseph Boza says, check the weather. High 70s, no rain, winds 8 to 12 miles per hour each day. Yeah, we'll keep an eye on that. Mike, there was the Max Homa question. By the way, Ryo Hisatsune, he has no history here. He's a guy I was on a couple of weeks ago, and he really kind of showed up. And I think he profiles pretty well for this course. So you mentioned Gary Woodland, Mike, earlier. But I do think we need to mention Max Homa. And any thought, like, I don't think a lot of people are going back to Max Homa. I think there's other 6K guys to go to, but any thoughts on Max Homa at a 6K price? I think he's 6,700.
I The computer likes it a little bit. I am going to caution against jumping back in on Max Homa. Now, you could make a similar argument to Will Zalatoris in that when we're talking about when we know that they're healthy and when we know that things are right, like he's clearly not a $6,700 golfer when things are right. I personally think that Max Homa, a lot of it is mental. I think a lot of it is I don't like to call into question anyone's motivation, but like, I think that to me, it makes sense that he played well at the Masters. It's the Super Bowl. It's the big event. He's the guy that's been vocal on social media. He is the guy that can go flip the switch a little, not like Brooks Koepka, but he can do it. Right. I'm going to be off of Max Homa here. Yeah, I'm not going to do it. I just think too many people are going to do it because of the price point and what he just did.
Yeah, I'm not going to, regardless of ownership, I don't think I'm going to be on Max Homa. I do want to point out, I don't think anybody's going to play Steven Yeager, especially when you got Lucas Glover, Will Zalatoris, some Ricky Fowler might pick up some ownership, and then all the other 6K guys that we talked about, like Jacob Bridgman and Valimaki. I think Yeager, just from a pure ownership leverage standpoint, is a sneaky play. Yep. I think he'll sort of dial it down on, off the tee, which is what a lot of those heavy hitters are going to do. And he's been pretty good on approach and everything else. Made the cut at the Masters last week. I think his course history here, as I scan, is miscut, and then T18 last year. So I think there's something to be said for some of those guys that aren't going to be mentioned much this week. Mike, talk to me about, so first of all, if you can jump into the chat or the show on Wednesday morning and talk to us about ownership, that would be great. You don't need to make any promises now, but that's always good to have that insight Wednesday morning at 10:30 when I go live with Rick Gaiman. But have you thought about winners yet? Is there I don't want your whole roster of winners right now, but is there a winner maybe towards the top of the board that you're like, I'm in on this guy this week?
So admittedly, I have not rerun the entire full set of Sims for this tournament yet. Again, Masters hangover for me is very real. Played just as we started the show, submitted 100 lineups for MLB DFS tonight. So I'm very much in tune in the DFS streets. But I can tell you, I'll have a little bit of Cantlay and Thomas. I just think that they should be better than 20-1 anytime the field's limited. I know that Scotty eats up a ton of win equity there. But because I'm interested in fading Morikawa, who is 11, and interested in fading Corey Connors at 25, that's naturally kind of going to funnel some of that additional value to the guys sandwiched between them, which would be Cantlay, Thomas, Xander, and Ludwig. So yeah, JT, Cantlay at the top would be the guys that I'll be buying there. And mid-range, Sungjae, 45.
Very interesting. I think in the mid-range, it would probably be Straka for me at that same number. Yep. Justin Thomas at the top ranges. And then because this is a signature event, I'm only going to deal with the without market for some of those longer range guys. And the reason I prefaced it like that is because I do think at an event like this, you're just going to see the guys at the top winning it, whether it's a Scotty or a Justin Thomas, or maybe as long as a 45-1, like those guys like Straka and Sungjae potentially in play in that range. But when it comes to those like 80 to 100 to 150 to 1 shots, I'm going to go ahead and take a few guys out in that without market. That's something that we'll talk about more on the betting show tomorrow night at 7. All right, Mike, any last words on this signature invite in terms of advice for everybody listening to the podcast or watching this show right now?
I think that, again, DFS in this day and age, it's gotten super efficient. So I think some of these narratives that we're talking about on people being burnt out and things like that, keep your ear to that, whether it be through content here, content everywhere else, and even just simple searches through Twitter and X. It's an underrated tool. I use a lot in the NFL and kind of crowdsource that to start to project ownership as well. I think that this is an interesting spot because I think DFS PGA is reaching that point where I think that takes that we've made, even just like that, on certain players potentially being burnt out, it's super easy to get a groupthink narrative going and maybe overstate some of that, which is what I'll be looking to potentially buy back into. So even if I said I may not have liked someone, that's why I'm going to come in on Wednesday and kind of give an ownership report and give a little better stance on some of those situations, because the fact is in the game of DFS, there is always a case to be made and always a certain price, a combination of price and ownership to where essentially any player in the field is playable.
The one guy that jumps out to me, and we'll close the show with him from a burnout factor, and this will be the narrative throughout the show. And not that this guy's a huge name when it comes to week to week conversation in the DFS streets, but Justin Rose. Like I would imagine, Mike, people are going to be like, I'm not playing Justin Rose. Like that had to take everything out of him. And I imagine that's probably your take right now, Mike. But if it's, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if it's overstated, then maybe we buy back in because he ends up being, 7% in a small field.
Yeah.
Or less.
If you're talking single digit ownership, it becomes a new question. Because again, he's not expensive. He's 8K, very playable. Yeah. The ownership is going to be very interesting this week.
All right. That'll do it. Jeff Stenberg says LFG. Thanks for being
in the Yankees score?
Yeah, it must have been. Jeff Stenberg, noted Yankees hater. Give us the update there. Sites 501, Joseph Bozo, Farzad, everyone, Taylor DeHart, David Talk. Thanks for being in here. Carson K. By the way, Carson K says, oof, Ludwig fumbled his matchup with Xander on Sunday. Mike, you probably don't know this, but I tweeted out that I liked, as kind of an official play. When I tweeted out, it's always an official play, that I liked Xander over Ludwig yesterday. And it was going extremely poorly. And I even tweeted out, hey, it's over. Sorry. It's a loss. I underestimated Ludwig, which I clearly did until the 18th hole where he triple bogeyed. I end up winning by 1 stroke. How about that?
Ooh, that is beautiful. That is absolutely beautiful.
You never want to be on the wrong side of a triple bogey to lose a matchup. Fortunately, I was on the wrong side of that bet, but I was on the right side of that bet. I'm not going to pat myself on the back for that one. Just a lucky happening. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining the show. We got our betting show tomorrow. Of course, we do on this channel the Early Edge, which Mike's a huge part of this week and every week. So make sure you tune in at every Monday through Friday at 10 in the morning. But we do 5 shows a week on the Early Wedge. So you're going to want to make sure you're tuned in, have your notifications turned on, and make sure you're subscribed to this YouTube channel. On behalf of Mike, on behalf of Josh, my name is Sia Nejad. We'll see you next time on the Early Wedge.